Hey, John.
Hey Rob, how are you doing?
So far, so good. Got a group of people who might be interested in participating, so I'm going to try and round them up and
That's very cool.
give everybody else a run.
So we're a little bit early, so I'm just going to
Sure. Yeah, no worries.
tap dance for a minute and admit
Absolutely.
people from the waiting room as they show up.
Yeah.
I confess I really had no idea. I have no idea how many people are going to be showing up for this meeting.
Is there anything you want me to say at the board meeting next week? Other than just to let them know the event's going on and see if they want to send out a blast or something?
Yeah, I would say just let them know that it's happening, and any
Okay.
publicity they can give it is great.
Okay. So I can do that.
So I'm not sure if that's Courtney who just joined. Your screen is so dark, like I can just see a ghostly image of a person.
Hey, John, sorry about that.
No, it's okay.
It's good to be here.
Okay, well, it is 6:30, and I'm going to keep just admitting people as they show up. But I don't have Tom and Laurel here, so I don't have the usual crew to help run the meeting in the background. Jenny is here, I see, although your camera is off and you're muted, but that's fine. I just wanted to really quickly talk about what this event is, or how I'm picturing it at this point, and answer any questions. So presumably you're here for the discussion of the Carpinteria Little Big Day. That is going to be taking place on Saturday, April 23rd, I want to say. Yes, Saturday, April 23rd. And, if you saw the announcement that I posted on the local birding mailing list, or if you got an email, it just describes it very briefly as this, what has turned into a two-part event, in part due to the good input from Rob Lindsay. But you can participate either in a casual, non-competitive mode, which is just go birding on that day. And if you're willing to, share an eBird trip report showing your birding that you did that day, and we'll post that trip report on the webpage for the event so people can share what they did and people can see what other people did. And then alongside that will be a friendly competition that we've set up to work kind of like, there's some events like this, not maybe around here so much, but the World Series of Birding kind of runs this way, where you basically have a team of 3 or more birders, and the team goes out there and tries to identify as many species as they can as a team. And the different teams are, again, in a friendly way, competing against each other. So you can find the most species. So it sounded like fun to do. I'd like to try and do it. When I talked to a few other people, they seemed to think it would be fun. So I don't know how many people are actually going to be interested in the competitive team-based approach and how many teams we will field on the day. But I think if we have at least 2 teams, we can have a competition. So we'll see how that goes.
It's fun, John. It's a great idea.
Thanks, Jenny. So yeah, and there's something else I need to admit. So I was just planning to show you briefly some of the resources that exist already, and just kind of acquaint you with, here's where the information is, and answer any questions that people have. So before I get started on that, are there any sort of birding top of the mind questions that people have right off the bat?
What are the boundaries?
I will talk about that. I'll show you
Okay.
the rules document, which includes a map.
Okay.
And shows you what the boundaries are. Yeah, why don't I just start going through it, because you don't know what to ask about if you don't know what I'm going to talk about. Let me go ahead and share my screen so you can see the web page that exists. So yeah, we'll give that a try. Okay, so at carpbirdwatchers.org, there is a link over in the right-hand column in the pages section that talks about the Carpinteria Little Big Day. And if you click on that, you come to this page. And it just has some brief information about the event, the two modes, the casual / non-competitive mode, and the team competition. It mentions this meeting. And then it has some links to things that might be useful for people. So the links that I provided here, they're divided up by the casual non-competitive folks and then the team competition. And for the casual non-competitive folks, I've linked to an eBird trip report how-to. The trip report feature in eBird is pretty new. So even if you're an experienced eBird user, you might not be familiar with how to use an eBird trip report. Again, for the casual folks, this is completely optional. Like you can share your checklist via a trip report if you choose to. You don't have to. I mean, you could also just go out and bird on that day, and that's how you participate. We'll probably have some kind of Zoom meeting at the end of the day where we'll announce the winners of the competition and people can share, what they did. And if you have a trip report, it's a little easier to share. So it's just a way of kind of merging some eBird lists together and seeing all the eBird lists. I'll show you an example of a trip report in just a minute. There is also a link to the trip report submission form. So there is a form that you can use to submit your trip report link. So a trip report in eBird, you can make it public, and then you can share a link to it, which is just a web address. And so you can come to this form and you can put in your email address, your team name if you're in the competitive category, or just none if you're in the casual category, the names of the people who participated, and your link to your trip report. And you submit that and it will come to us and to me and the people organizing this, and we can post that link on the web page so people can see what you did. So that is what the form looks like.
John, is the trip report basically just a checklist?
It is sort of a layer above the checklist. So a trip report collects one or more checklists in eBird. And in fact, I can just show you. So
Please.
I was curious what, like how many species would it be possible to get? And I'm planning to participate in the competitive category, and I'm, heavily going through my mind of like all the people I might try and entice to be part of the team and try to put together the best team I can put together. But an eBird trip report looks like this. And my thought was, well, how many species would it be possible to get? So one thing I did is I said, okay, I'm going to make a trip report that's just all the checklists that I have submitted in the month of February within the boundaries of the Little Big Day circle. And we'll talk about those in just a second. But you see all these pins here. Those are all the locations that fell into that category. So I had 38 checklists, and you can kind of scroll through the list of checklists. If you look at the species observed, so I had 117 species, and then you can look at the list of species, and you can, if there are photos, you can look at the photos, and you can see which individual checklists had those birds. It's just a fun way to kind of dig through this information. So I was kind of excited that there were 117 species. Now, that's not in 4 hours. That's a whole month of birding. So, the real interesting question is how many species can a team of organized, active birders get in just 4 hours? Let me see. Oh, and I've got people in the waiting room. I've got to admit the people from the waiting room. Yes, admit. Sorry, I'm multitasking. But that's basically what an eBird trip report looks like. And let's see. And then I wanted to talk about the competition part. And the competition has a link to a rules document. And I probably should apologize in advance. Rob, you've dealt with me for a while. You know that I am prone to this. I get very into things. I get very excited about things, and I put in lots of energy, and I do lots of organizing, and I spin out this like elaborate rules document. Maybe it's too elaborate, I don't know. But my goal was to come up with a rules document that would cover everything we could reasonably cover so that we'd have a good level playing field for the people who are competing. So there, as I say, if you go to the webpage for the event, there is a link to this document and you can review the document. And it's like, 13 pages long or something. There's a lot of detail. But it has a summary. It talks about how to register for the event. The deadline for registration is 1 day before the event, so Friday, April 22nd. So you have until then. If you're on the fence, you can wait till the last minute. Teams have a designated team leader, a team name, so we know what to call you. Teams have to have at least 3 people and can have no more than 5 people. But then the team can have additional non-birding assistants. So if you want someone to drive you around or bring you snacks or something, you can do that outside of the 3 to 5 birders. I don't know that anyone would choose to do that, but you can. There's a discussion about what to do if your team falls below 3 people. You can swap somebody into the team. So you can, if there's a crisis, your team assistant can be pressed into service as a team member. And you basically need, so this outside information section is talking about the fact that to have a fair competition, the teams cannot solicit information from outside the team. So you can't have scouts out there reporting to you, because that would be an unfair advantage for the teams that had done that. You have to just do it with the resources on your team. And if people leave the team for whatever reason, they can't bird independently and then supply that information back to the team when they come back. So you can't like split up and go 3 different places to decide where you want to go bird. I don't know. Some of these rules, again, they've been doing this with the World Series of Birding back in New Jersey for a number of years, and seems to work for them. So I kind of, copied a lot of their rules without really necessarily knowing exactly why that rule makes sense. Identification of birds, their discussion about, you can identify birds by sight or sound, but be, conservative, only if you're confident. And 3 people on the team need to be confident in the identification for you to count the bird. So again, it's a team event. And one thing I do talk about here, since we're using eBird to submit the sightings, in the event, you report a rarity that requires documentation in eBird. The judgment of the eBird reviewers will count in terms of whether or not you get to count that species towards your team's total. And that, the volunteer reviewers at eBird, it takes a while sometimes for that to happen. So we may have provisional results on the day of the competition that might have to be adjusted later based on the result of the reviewers' review of any rare species. I'm not going to go through all the rules. You can, if you're going to participate, you should read the rules and make sure you understand all the stuff that's going on. But the boundaries are probably important. So it's 8 a.m. to noon is the time during which you can bird. So right on the dot at 8 o'clock, that's when you can start birding. And right on the dot at noon, that's when you must stop birding. And then geographically, it's a 7-mile diameter circle centered at Foothill and Linden Avenue, I think, like just east of Carpinteria High School. So it's a little bit less than half the size of the Christmas count circle. So it's smaller. There is a link to an interactive version of this map, so you can zoom in if you want to see, details about right where the boundary is. And then, and the entire circle is inbounds, and only the birders have to be inbounds. You can look outside the circle and count birds that are beyond the boundary. So if you're like doing a sea watch here at Loon, if like here at Rincon Point, if you're doing a sea watch there, you don't have to worry like, oh, is that bird I'm seeing outside the circle? As long as you are in the circle, you can count any birds that you can identify, no matter how far away they are. And then there are 3 places where the boundary has been extended. And this was just for convenience. I'm running through my head, like zipping around in this circle, trying to visit as many sites as we can. There's a few spots where it kind of makes sense that you would go outside the circle just to navigate your way around. So this is the Padero off-ramp. for the freeway at the sort of west side of the circle. And so the boundary has been extended along Via Real to Padero and then back down into Padero. So if you came down and you wanted to go cover Padero Lane, you don't have to leave, you don't have to like stop competing while you go around this road and then come back in. The whole thing is inbounds. You can just stay inbounds as you make that turn there. And the same thing up here, Toro Canyon Park is, a good site. It's got some inland chaparral that you can get to quickly and efficiently. You don't have to hike for a long time to get in there. So I thought that might be popular with teams. But the road there goes outside the circle for just a little bit here. So Toro Canyon Road, the whole of Toro Canyon Road up to the turnoff to Toro Canyon Park is all inbounds. You can bird from that road. And then the last boundary extension over on the eastern side, if you take the 150, towards Ojai, the boundary of the circle is right about where Gobernador Canyon intersects the 150. And basically I extended the boundary there. So if you take the 150, you're inbounds all the way to Gobernador Canyon. And then it re-enters the circle. So you're good there. So do the boundaries make sense to people? Are there any questions about the boundaries? I mean, for me, a lot of the fun of this is going to be, planning where can we go and how many of those places we might go to, can we go to, and in the time allowed and what's the best route. And let's see, reporting procedures. I'm saying that you must report your sightings via eBird. This is to make life easier for the organizers. Having just gone through the compilation process for the Christmas count, I'm very focused on streamlining the effort for the compiler as much as possible. So there's a pretty strict, you basically must, if you're in the competition, you must submit your birds via eBird and you must include them in a trip report that is publicly viewable, and you must provide the link to the trip report via that same form that I was showing you earlier. And you have to do all of that by 1 p.m. on the day of the competition. So the 1 hour, you have 1 hour after the competition ends to get your trip report link with all your checklists in so that we can see who won. You can actually set up an eBird trip report in advance. You just define the dates and then it sort of will, as you submit checklists within that time frame, they'll just automatically go into your trip report. So that can save you some time. And we can talk about that if people have questions about that, or if you look in the trip report feature, it'll explain how to do that. But that can make your life easier on the day. If there's anything you don't have to do at the end of the competition would be good. More details about documentation, deadlines. Oh, and then there's this fairly detailed section. And this is very worth, again, if you're in the competition, you definitely need to go through this section carefully to make sure you understand. There's a number of places where we've set up rules that say, oh, you cannot bird here. And these are places that you normally could bird potentially. But there were a few reasons why we excluded certain areas. Like for the restricted access part of the Carpinteria Salt Marsh, some people have access to that because there's this ongoing, bird monitoring program and there's a locked gate and you can sign up in advance and you can go in, but other people don't have access to that. So that wouldn't be fair if some teams had the ability to go in there and others did not. So we just said it's off limits, like you can't actually go into the restricted access portion. You can bird into it from outside, and the rules talk about specifically where you can do that, where it is okay to do that. We did specifically say that you cannot bird along the railroad tracks anywhere in the circle. Like you can cross the railroad tracks, like at the bluffs where there isn't a controlled crossing, but people do routinely cross it. You can cross the railroad tracks at Estero Way to go right up to the locked gate into the restricted access part of the UC Reserve at the Salt Marsh. But you can't bird from the railroad tracks or the railroad right-of-way. And this just seemed like a safety concern, with competition and people running around and paying attention to birds. We just didn't want groups of birders, traipsing along the railroad tracks. So if you want to like you can't walk that section of the railroad tracks that borders the salt marsh. You can bird in from the parking lots of the businesses on the south side of Carpinteria Avenue. So you can kind of look across the railroad tracks into the marsh from there. And you can bird into the marsh from the locked gate, from outside the locked gate at Estero Way. So as I said, there's a lot of detailed discussion about the salt marsh, about Carpinteria Creek, about the Carpinteria Bluffs, and Rincon Creek and Lake Jocelyn. Just, details about if you're going to bird there as part of the competition, there are certain areas you are allowed to go and certain areas you are not allowed to go. And again, this was, mostly in the interest of not having lots of people birding someplace that might be sensitive due to private property concerns, or, so you can read those details and hopefully it will all make sense. Let's see what else. So the rules state that pishing is allowed. You can use you can use your human voice to do bird sound, to manipulate the birds, although it recommends doing it in moderation. And you may not use recorded playback in order to attract birds or elicit a response from birds. There's a link to the American Birding Association's Code of Birding Ethics, which we require all teams to be familiar with and to follow. And then there's a section about disputes and protests. And I grew up doing a lot of competitive sailboat racing, so I feel like we have to have a protest procedure, because in sailing there's always protest, not always, but there are sometimes protests. So there is a protest procedure. I think it's highly likely we won't actually have any protests, but if you feel that another team has broken the rules in some significant way, there is a process you can follow, and you can read about how to do that there. And that is the end of the rules document. There's a lot of detail there, and that didn't really cover it all, but maybe that is enough that you can get a taste of what's in there. Again, I'm really not sure how many people are going to want to incur the mental overhead of competing under those rules. I think it sounds like fun, but that could just be me being weird. I don't know. I guess we'll find out.
No, you're not the only one.
Okay. And let's see. I think that is pretty much everything that I wanted to go over, other than, I did want to talk about this. So I showed you the trip report that I did of all the sites I had birded during the month of February inside the boundaries. And again, that was 38 checklists. No one's going to be able to hit 38 sites in 4 hours. That just isn't going to happen. But then I did do another trip report that was just 10 sites, because I figure, getting the right balance of time and effort, and like the more sites you can visit, that's conceivably better. But the more sites you visit, the shorter amount of time you have at each site. So there's going to be some sort of optimum, time spent per site that you're going to have to figure out as part of your team strategy. I just picked 10 just as a starting point to see what I would get. And so I picked 10 sites that are all, sort of give a nice mix of habitats. And I just took my most recent eBird checklist from each of those sites. And I thought it was really interesting. So I ended up with 100 species, just visiting 10 sites within the Carpinteria Circle. So to me, that seems like a very ambitious goal, that you could do that in just 4 hours. Because again, there was a lot more than 4 hours of birding in my 10 checklists. But I was also doing it on my own, and as a team, maybe you can have, more eyeballs, more ears. Maybe you can find more species more quickly. But if you're interested, I'll post links to these trip reports on that page at Carp Birdwatchers about the event. So if you want, you can click through and you kind of look in detail. I did include a restricted access visit to the salt marsh. So again, to get those birds in particular, you'd have to be looking in from outside, which would be challenging. But those are the places that I included in my 10 checklists. So I guess I will stop sharing. That is pretty much what I had to show people. I'm interested in what people think, if they're planning to participate, or if this information makes them more or less likely to participate. what do people think?
Well, you've obviously been very thorough, and it's probably good to preclude any problems that might arise. But the fundamental goal and rules about this are awfully clear and easy to follow.
Yeah, I am. I'm not sure. Like, I'm a pretty slow birder, I think, just by nature. And the times I've tried to bird quickly, it's definitely a different kind of experience. I'm into going slowly and communing with the environment and listening and lingering. And there's not going to be a lot of lingering in this event if you want to try and be competitive. It's going to be moving very quickly. Okay, well, are there any questions from anybody? Anything you want me to address, or feedback, suggestions? This information is not carved in stone. This is, I've had a few people look at this, and we've had a few rounds of feedback on it, but this is a wider airing than it's had up until now in terms of the people who are seeing it. So there could very well be, good suggestions that things we haven't thought of.
What do you think about how many people have kind of expressed interest in this?
It's limited. I mean, I've only really been putting the information out there in a major way for less than a week here. So it's happening pretty quickly. There are a few people who I know will not be able to be there. Linus Blomqvist is going to be out of town, I think, and Nick Lethaby is also going to be unavailable. So I've heard from a few people who cannot do it. As far as how many people are willing to do it, are interested in doing it, I'm just going to have to, we're going to have to find out. Again, the deadline is, I pushed the deadline pretty late, so people can take their time to decide.
Right.
I'm certainly going to start, reaching out to people to put a team together and try and get organized and, do some scouting, do some practicing, kind of, try and get some good practice in. I don't know, it's been fun for me. I mean, I've been birding in this circle more in the last few weeks, just, in thinking about it. And that's been a fun experience.
It sounds fun, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it should be fun. And,
Yeah.
I'm just very curious to see what we can actually do. How many species you can actually get in 4 hours in Carpinteria.
John, neither I or any member of my potential team are eBirders, but it kind of sounds like we need to get at least somebody on eBird in order to participate, as you're hoping the participants will.
So the rules do allow you to have a non-birding assistant who can enter data if you want. Like, one of the things that the non-birding, like there can be people associated with the team who are not officially part of the team. And these are your non-birding assistants. And as long as they're not actually calling your attention to birds or assisting the birding in that way, you can have someone enter your eBird list for you, which might actually be, a good strategy in some ways, because I know myself, like when I'm entering data in eBird, I'm not as attuned to what's going on around me. I kind of feel like, the ideal team might be 4 of the best birders I can find, to be in this team of 4, one of whom, or maybe they take turns, like doing the data entry, so that at least 3 of them at all times are very focused on identifying the birds. And I think for time efficiency, I tend to do complete checklists in eBird, where you enter all the birds you identify and you do a count of all the species. I suspect for this event, to be competitive, you're not going to want to do that. You're going to want to just enter the species that are new and not bother counting individual birds. So it'll just be X's, it'll be, because then you can, because the process of entering the data, there's going to be some overhead there. There's going to be communication. It's going to slow you down. You're going to be talking about things other than finding and identifying the next bird that you need for your total. So I don't know, but that might be something to be interesting to practice with. But yeah, if you want to do the competitive category, I really think it's, again, in the interest of minimizing effort for all for the people organizing it and who want to compile the information at the end. If we can do it via eBird trip report, it's basically all compiled for us. We can basically just look at each trip report and it'll give us a list of all the species for every team. And that appeals to me.
Yeah. I bet, especially after the Christmas bird count, I bet that was a lot of work.
Yeah, that was a major factor in my thinking when I said, oh,
Yeah.
let's just make it eBird trip report.
Yeah.
But I mean, that could be a stumbling block, and people, if eBird is something you're just not interested in doing, you can totally participate in the event in the casual non-competitive category, and you could follow as many of those rules as you want. You just would be submitting your information in whatever way you wanted to submit it, and it wouldn't be included in the competition. Okay, anything else from anyone? All right, well, hearing nothing, thank you, all of you, for coming out and at least having this much interest in the event. And if you have questions, feel free to email me, and we'll see where it goes. And watch that page at carpbirdwatchers.org. We'll put updates there as the event gets closer. And if you do form a team, go ahead and there's a registration form. Go ahead and register your team. You can do that in advance, and it'd be fun to see if people are actually preparing themselves to participate. I'll put a link to this video. I'm not sure if this is really that informative, but if somebody's really interested in seeing what we talked about there, I'll post the video on that webpage so people can view it after the fact. But I guess if there's nothing else, I will go ahead and say goodbye to folks. Is there any last minute input from anybody? All right, hearing no input, thanks everyone. And I'll go out there birding. Yeah, thanks, Jenny.
Thanks. See ya.
Yep, see you all later.